Thank you, sir. Member Ridley.
Thank you. Just comment that the robotics Super Bowl, I guess it was called, at Longden was really neat. I was real amazed at the complexity of the robotic activities that were taking place. I think it was pretty sophisticated stuff being run by pretty young students, so it was very impressive. And for the record, I'd like to say that I left before the pizzas got there. And then I dropped in at Emperor during Boys and Girls Night Out last week, and it was a real pleasure to see the presentation for the boys presented by Peggy and John Legault, two pediatricians that I think have performed this service voluntarily for us for probably something like maybe almost 20 years. And I'd just like to publicly acknowledge and thank them for that contribution. They do a real nice job, and it's certainly part of an educational process to learn about growing up. Thank you.
Thank you. Member Bell.
Hi, well, good evening. I wanted to say that choreo, high school's choreo team did a fantastic job with their performance at the San Gabriel Mission. We thoroughly enjoyed that. And as a parent with a daughter who's practicing ballet for the better part of 5 years, she's, she idolizes the high school kids, and she looks forward to perhaps getting an opportunity to take part in that someday. Let's see, I attended the round table at La Rosa. I thought that was very meaningful. But the most important part was seeing representatives from other districts visit the classroom as the kids were participating and learning how to use these programs to create things that were relevant for them. Frankly, the kids, there were about maybe 24 kids, and there was probably 30 adults, and we didn't exist to them. We were practically invisible for all sense and purpose. And I think that's the important part. But again, a lot of good questions were raised, a lot of discussions about, the possibilities of interjecting computer science in meaningful ways towards our core curriculum someday. So hopeful about that. Let's see, what else did we do? Actually, that's about it. Oh, I do want to plug Founders Day. That is the one event in the year where we have a dinner to honor all the families and all the volunteers at all the sites.
Who's we?
I'm sorry, I apologize. I should thank you for getting that for me. Learning. The Temple City Council PTA and all the PTAs at all the sites. I lose that fact sometimes. Anyway, it is on February 26th. Dinner starts at 7 o'clock. And the purpose of this dinner is to recognize and award individuals, whether it be parent or not, for all their hard work and going above and beyond to help the students at all our schools. So dinner is $15. It's not too bad. I invite all of you guys to join us, hopefully. And I am this year's chairperson, so I'm shamelessly plugging it. So, and that's it.
Is your personal cell phone on the flyer?
Absolutely. And anyone may call me up until 2 o'clock in the morning, because that's when I go to sleep.
Thank you, Member Bell. Wow. Well, gosh, when you're the president and everyone else speaks before you and talks about all the great things they've done, it's a little humbling when you haven't maybe done quite as much yourself. But I will say it's great to hear about all the things happening at our schools, and especially trips. I'm not aware of the Yosemite trip, so I look forward to hearing how that goes. I unfortunately was not able to make it to the robotics Super Bowl. I regret that. My wife was there, actually, the first lady of the Temple City School Board. And she reported back to me. That weekend we also had to juggle a performance. The Southern California School Band and Orchestra Association had their honors performances that weekend, which included performances of 2 pieces by Richard Meyer, one of the music teachers at Oak. And so I was fortunate enough to be able to hear those and to sit with Mr. Meyer. and my daughter was playing in one of the groups that played one of his pieces. So, but you know, Richard Meyer, and I could speak about him for a long time, but you know, the amount of respect he has from other music teachers, and it's emblematic, I know, of so many other professional teachers that we have, and the respect that they have in their fields. But it really, when someone like him is seen as associated with our district, it reflects incredibly well on our district. And I think we're going to move on now, and I am trying to keep our meetings moving. And I will possibly at some point take a short break if the meeting is going long and I feel that it would be necessary or be helpful for us to move things along. So with that, and I will point out that there's no item for superintendent comments. Our superintendent is at the Association of California School Administrators Superintendent Symposium, and I heard from her today, and she says she's learning a lot and having a great time. My comments are done. Written communications. I have not received any written communications. Are there any other written communications? Okay, seeing none, then we will move on to our discussion information items, items that the board would like to discuss or have information presented to them. These items do not require board action, and we will start with item number 15, an update on the bond projects.
Good evening. The first slide here represents all of the projects on the phase 1 or first bond issue. The budgets have basically stayed the same. The only thing that has changed from the last time you've seen this is estimated start dates and completion dates. Once we get a better idea of DSA approval, that's when we can kind of nail down those dates. I wanted to give a final cost for the Temple City Interim Housing Project. That contract was awarded to PCN3. We did have a deductive change order that went to board, I believe, in November for $38,000. Mobile Modular's cost, which was a piggyback, was $310,992. Southern California Edison application and meter fees, $64,516, which we were not expecting it to be that high. They initially said it would be around $15,000, and once we got their plan and the cost, that's what it was. Power Plus, we initially were contracting with them for 3 weeks, because that's initially what Southern California Edison said it would take them to be complete, and it took them a little over 2 months. So we were not anticipating those costs as well. So as you can see with the total in the original budget, it was over by $259,673. So that cost will come out of the program contingency.
Could I just follow up? Oh, Member Tiet.
Go ahead first. You first.
Me first? Are you sure?
Go ahead.
No, I'm the president and I acknowledge other board members. I insist.
Since I'm disappointed now, and I'll ask the question. Mobile modular for 310, all the stuff we did not, was that not budgeted or was that over budget or?
No, that was budgeted. That went to board, I want to say, last April.
Okay,
And
so
that
we're
was
over.
budgeted.
We're over by almost $260,000, and from this seems like, I guess in looking at this, I can't tell where we're over budget, other than the Southern California Edison SCE portion. I think we're over by something like 40,
About 50,000.
50,000. Okay, but then where's the other 210,000?
The original contract was, it did come in, the project itself did come in over budget.
Yes, but it.
And we did, when that came in over budget, we used program contingency to cover that.
Okay.
But I wanted to show the whole picture here.
Okay, Is there a slide later on that will tell us where, what part, what caused the 200,000, 210,000 in additional expense?
There's not, but we can do that.
Okay, alright. And then, let me go back one slide if I may. To the first slide where you have the projected start date. So this is back in November 2013, September, is there any idea as to when?
Oh, no, that's not, I'm sorry, I apologize, that's not correct.
Okay,
Those are, the first two should be February 2015.
the first two being items 1 and 2, Cloverly and La Rosa will be February.
2015,
Okay, so we have DSA approval then?
yes.
Yes?
And
Okay,
I think that may be covered by a later slide, so, is that right?
yes.
Okay. Do we still have questions on the first two slides? That won't be addressed in the presentation, or should we let him finish? Well, hold on, Member Tiet, are you?
I'm
go
done,
ahead.
I'm done.
Okay, Member Nolenberg, you have a question on these two slides?
The modular, do we own them, or the 310,000 square
They're
foot
leased.
are owned, lease,
Please.
for how many years? 2 or 3 years?
Mr. Member Nolenberg, I can't hear you, is your microphone on?
I believe it's for 24 months.
Okay, thanks, proceed.
The next project is Cloverly. The interim housing project is complete. Interim housing is complete, and they are occupying that building. And the modernization has been approved by DSA. It's out to bid currently. As of when this was printed, the bid date was January 29th, but that has been moved to February 12th. And we are expecting to begin late February and be completed by the end of the year. And the next slide just shows expenditures to date, basically just on the planning side, because we won't be plugging in construction costs, obviously, until those projects bid and there's contracts awarded. 8 that were approved, and I believe 7 are bidding.
But then the details of those bids are what you would receive before February 12th.
Correct.
Member Tiet?
Or on the 12th.
On the 12th, all right.
I have a question with the interim housing at Cloverly and La Rosa. I think, I like your slide 2, what you did with Temple City and the interim housing project. I don't see one for the other 2, is there a reason?
Those already had a notice of completion, and there was no additional cost. The bid amount was the final contract amount,
Okay,
so that was it.
okay.
There's actually nothing to report other than it's completed.
Okay, and then I think with respect to slide 2, then you're going to, I guess, modify it to, okay. All right, that's all, thank you.
The next slide is Longden. And that is the modernization of the old two-story classroom building, the kindergarten buildings, and all the related site work. LPA, the architect, is continuing with the construction document phase. They want to submit to DSA before the end of February, and it looks like we're on target for that. Construction is scheduled to begin, we're hoping before the end of the year, and have an 18-month construction duration. But once they get into DSA and we can get some review times, we'll be able to have a better idea of those actual start and completion dates. The next item for that site is to look at interim housing options, how many, where, things like that. So that will be the next discussion with the site.
Okay, I was gonna ask about that, when you say how many, any idea of how many might possibly be?
I'm thinking 6. That way, one side of each building can kind of go at the same time, and then just kind of shuffle them all around.
And then would that involve moving classrooms partway through the year then if one section is finished?
Absolutely.
I see, okay. Is that being done also at La Rosa and Cloverleaf to
Yes.
move in for part of the year?
Yes.
I see. Any other questions about Longden, Member Nolenberg?
At Longden, have the plans been approved by the site committee or whatever?
Yes.
They've seen all
Yes.
of them? Okay. And those plans are available for the public or not?
No. And the next slide is the expenditures for Longden. Again, they're just planning fees. The construction costs that you see at the bottom, those were for the Eno project, and that is completed.
Can I ask you a question, I'm sorry? So seeing the La Rosa budget, the projected budget for interim housing was 300,000, and for Longden it's less, it's 227. So do we think 227 is realistic?
No, it
And
is,
I know 6 isn't necessarily the number, but,
right.
go ahead.
La Rosa did come in way under budget, so we know that. This budget is short a little bit, but this is the project where we're using partial Series B bond sales to fund this. So we know that this is not enough for the project, so once the next series gets sold, we can fill in the balance of the budget. This is just, basically just to get the planning and the plans going, so we can get it into DSA.
Okay, well then let's stay with this slide for a minute then. So we're expecting that the interim housing amount will probably have to increase.
Yes.
Can I just ask you, the architect and engineering fees, I mean, how much of that, and I realized that there had been some changes that were in some ways out of our control, but we paid to design things that are not scheduled to be built, is that right?
Correct.
So part of the fees, part of the architect fees are for designing a building that right now is not planned to be built?
Correct.
Okay. Does this estimate though, I mean, as you look on this sheet, besides the interim housing, are there other pieces of it that you expect might need to be increased?
The only thing that's gonna be increased, there was a decrease to the architectural fees because of the admin and media, or library building. So there is a deduct from that, but we wanna see how much it's gonna cost for the interim housing for them to design that and get that through DSA. So once we get that cost, then we'll be able to finalize that credit.
Okay. And since you brought up the next series, and I definitely want you to be able to finish your presentation, and when it's done, I may turn to my fellow board members and ask at what points we will be planning the next whatever. And if there's another series happening and that series is expected to cover certain expenses, then at some point, and it's not necessarily tonight, we don't have our fearless leader here next to me. Although I have more room on the desk, that's kind of nice, but I miss having her here. But as far as a planning schedule, you know, what we want to do and what dates we want to have things planned for the future, I'd like to start talking about that only, obviously, in order to maybe have something as an action item in the future. But, okay, I'm sorry, Mr. Rodriguez, go ahead.
The next slide is Emperor, and this site has two projects. One is the window replacement project that's already been DSA approved. The other project is the modernization of the two remaining classroom buildings and the administration building. So, like I said, the window replacement project, that's been approved. The drawings for the modernization are gonna be submitted, I believe, on Friday. So we're hoping to get those out of DSA before or around summer, so we can begin that project then. And then that would be open it'd be basically a 14-month construction duration. So we would also need to begin the conversation with interim housing there also. But that looks like it's only gonna be 4 classrooms because each building is 4, so.
And regarding the interim housing, do the costs of that depend on, well, how much do they depend on what the housing's going on and what the condition is of the earth or whatever it is, and how much conditioning, if you will, has to be done to that before the housing is put on? Is it, and that's, I get to ask a lot of questions at once, I guess, I'm not in court. Is that one of the reasons the interim housing at the high school came in, I mean, the bid came in higher, as I recall, higher than expected. Was it because of the ground that it was going on to, or?
It was
other-
going on a baseball field, so
Right,
there was a lot of stuff that needed to happen before the buildings could be placed.
okay, and we don't know necessarily what sites would be chosen for interim housing for the other schools yet, but, less likely that it would be on a field.
Correct. That's not the best place.
Yeah, but I believe, and, okay, now I'm just going way back, but remember, Tia, your question about the, I think the bids, all of the bids that we received for the interim housing for the high school were all just on an average basis noticeably higher than had been originally budgeted for. Is that right?
Yes.
Yes. Member Nolenberg?
Yes, for Amber, is ADA costs included? Are we doing ADA mods?
Yes.
So we're doing more than just the modernization is ADA?
Yes. Well, with the window replacement, that triggered the ADA upgrades.
Okay.
So with the modernization, we won't need to do that.
Is this 100% of all facilities?
Yes. Except with the exception of the cafeteria.
Oh, because it's already current?
No, that building's not being touched because in order to do one thing in that building, we would have to do a whole bunch, and that would eat up the entire budget for the site. So,
Member Tia?
From, and this, for lack of a better word, I've called all these projects phase one. All the architectural and engineering fees, they've already been committed. Most of them this year, some of them been paid, right?
correct.
Now, with respect to construction costs, then that we haven't done much to because we haven't started building.
That's correct.
And my next question then, maybe I'm not expecting an answer, but right away, but will, I think at the CSBA conference, we were introduced to some prefabricated buildings and whatnot. Will that necessarily lower the cost of construction?
The CSBA was a California School Board Association conference and some of us attended.
It just depends. I mean, it depends on, like here, it wouldn't make sense to because doing modernization would be much simpler and faster rather than tearing down the buildings and bringing something brand new.
But in the high school,
That-
the 100, 200, 300, we're actually doing new construction.
Correct.
Right?
Yes.
And so that may be something that would fit the model of a prefabricated building.
For 100, 200, 300?
Yes.
It could, but it doesn't.
Okay.
For that specific project, it doesn't.
Okay. Then, all right.
I think we'll get to the high school in a moment. Any other questions so far?
And then these are the expenditures for Emperor. Again, we've only had some planning costs. Once a project bids, we'll start plugging in the construction costs. The next one is Temple City High School, two-story classroom building. It's actually being reviewed by DSA right now. We did receive comments back from access compliance and fire life safety. So the only ones that are due are the structural, and those are due Friday. So they've been tracking okay online, so once we get the balance of the comments, the corrections can be made and they can be resubmitted. So all goes well, we could get approval the end of February and start construction right after that.
Member Ridley?
Thank you. I'm just curious, in the fourth wing, the north side, there's some very small lettering. Could you tell us what that says?
It says possible future building, or potential future building. Because I know there was some comments made on that building before, and we're trying to get the graphic updated. It just didn't make it yet.
So, right, so we were talking about 100, 200, 300, it will be the first three of that series, and the currently existing building won't look like that, but it will be there in the place of where the fourth wing is, and, yes.
Yes.
Joe?
It's only the 100 and 200 buildings that went down. The 300 building is the
Oh, it's the
that we're
current.
currently in. So there's
Right.
only gonna be 3 wings, but not 4.
Right,
So it's only,
you're building 2 new ones.
3.
You're building 3 new
Three
ones.
to replace the 2.
yeah.
Okay,
We're
and what,
tearing down 21 classrooms, getting 34.
right, good. And, but what are we gonna call them? Are we still calling them 100 and 200 and 250?
We haven't gotten that far.
That hasn't yet.
We'll wait till we see them.
New stuff. I suggest the Kenneth Nolenberg Institute. No.
So, I'm sorry.
Number it's yet.
So in this situation, like back to the prefabrication, the prefabricated buildings, it wouldn't fit in our, I guess, footprint here, or?
No, when you do prefabricated buildings, they usually have, they're pre-approved by DSA. And they have a certain number of modules. You can do 5 classrooms, 10 classrooms, 15 classrooms. And they all have to fit their footprint, not necessarily our footprint. So, looking at one of these, we could either get 30 classrooms or 40 classrooms. You can't get 34. You can't just add 1 classroom if you wanted to. You have to add a whole module. So that doesn't work. And their classrooms are the same square footage, but the size is different. They're longer and narrow, so having them fit here would be a challenge too.
So then when these new buildings were designed, using the prefabricated construction, what wasn't really part of the plan?
Correct.
Right, okay. I mean, arguably, maybe it could have been, or for another building in the future, maybe it could be. And whether at that point, doing that would change the cost or not would be something for us to look at. But you're saying that with these buildings here, it's not something that could be included at this point?
Correct.
Or considered, okay. Other? Member Bell?
For understanding purposes, and this relates to slide number 2, I'm just curious to know when your company decides on the contingency plan or contingency budget for each site, how does that work? Is that based off of a percentage?
It's a percentage of the budgeted construction cost.
Right, so, okay, so in this case, at the high school, you're at 22.8, so, and you had.
I'm sorry, Member Bell is asking, I think, about the slide after this.
Oh,
Is that right?
right, I'm sorry, yes,
Oh, okay.
that slide right there, thanks. So, we know clearly that we're at 271,000 above right now, so I'm just curious, what's the actual clearance for the high school's contingency budget? Just, I'm not saying anything's gonna go wrong, but just out of curiosity.
What do you mean?
Well, you base everything on the percentage, so what does that percentage usually look like? So for example, in this case, the combined project total is at 22.8, 22.9 million.
Mhm.
What would you guys normally allocate as a contingency budget?
Well, it would be a percentage of the construction cost of the 16.8 million.
Oh, I see, okay. Okay. And is that like 5%?
I believe it's
4%? Oh, okay, all right, thank you.
When we talked about the interim housing at the high school, the shortfall being funded by the program contingency, then we're talking about the same line item that's here on this spreadsheet?
No, this is construction contingency.
Program
The program
contingency versus,
contingency is on slide, page 1,
yes,
item 9.
I see, okay, a program contingency for the whole project, or for all the projects?
Correct.
And that's separate and apart from the construction contingency.
Right, because we haven't gone into construction yet, so.
But have we set aside the funds for construction contingency, or is it feeding off of the same
No,
account?
no. If you look on here on page 12, the construction contingency, that is just for the 34 classroom building project.
But so that's project by project basis, whereas the program is for the entire everything.
Right.
And that could incorporate various things. The program contingency is pretty general, yes?
Yes.
And it could incorporate changes in material costs, or is that part of construction? Not
We don't wanna use that as the construction contingency.
Okay, construction contingency would deal with,
If we have-
higher than expected supply costs or material costs.
That or, unforeseen conditions underground, they're digging a footing and they come into some asbestos piping, that would be covered by that.
Okay, member Nolberg,
Yeah.
then member Ridley.
On the high school specifically, with the new classroom, do we have to do any furniture or anything, or do we have enough existing furniture?
There is a furniture budget,
For,
but that hasn't been finalized or decided or anything.
But that is bond proceeds going to furniture.
Member Ridley? And then I'm just curious about, again, the construction, can't say it, construction contingency. If I look at the construction costs of 16 million, 1% of that would be 168,000. So that sure makes me think that the 271,000 is maybe 1.5%, which seems like an awfully low contingency. Why is it so low? And, what concerns does that raise that we should have?
Well, we have money left in the technology piece. And that would go, whatever is left over, say there's money left over from the planning costs, anything left over, once we know it's been spent, goes into construction contingency. So that number is gonna keep going up as we get closer to construction, and the planning costs are done and paid.
Questions right now? Member Tiet?
More in line with what Member Ridley's saying. Because of the delay in getting on these plans through DSA, and I foresee that to be happening again in the future, having a 1.5 or 1.6 construction contingency would not be, I don't think it's sufficient to cover the escalation in cost. Would it, better serve us to have a higher construction contingency?
Yeah, and like I explained, as you can see, there's gonna be money left in the planning costs. All that money is gonna go towards construction contingency.
But that's only in this one particular case. It doesn't mean that that's gonna happen. My point is, would it serve us better to just, from the outset, say construction contingency is X%, whatever that X is, but greater than what we have it here? Will we be able to plan for that? Do we have enough funds to set aside for
Yes.
that particular contingency?
Yeah, we do.
And then will that eat into our program contingency?
It may or may not, it may. But it just depends how everything comes out with the planning costs and also the construction costs. Because whatever is under budget for construction, if that does come in under budget, that also goes to contingency. So everything left over goes to the construction contingency. So we can always, front it from program contingency, and then when we have the final numbers, put it back. But we usually just leave it until we get hard numbers.
But my concern is, there will come a time when we don't have more to put back in it. Then where do we get it from?
Well, we would know what the budget is, and we would have to design to that budget. If it comes over budget, then we would need to look at value engineering to get the project in budget.
Value engineering, meaning cutting costs, meaning doing less than was actually planned.
Correct.
3 footings, you put 2 footings.
2 footings, I'm not sure there is. Member Bell?
Okay, just again for clarification and understanding, as I see the construction costs set at, let's call it 18.3 million, was this number recently adjusted to reflect 2014, 2015 dollars, or this was originally something that was based off of 2012. I know that during planning, I think I've heard this before, that you guys added some percentage above that just to kind of counter inflation in some way. So is that true? I mean, I'm sorry, let me rephrase that. Does this number still hold true with what you're expecting as far as the bids that are gonna come in?
Yes.
Okay.
We estimated to the midpoint of construction.
Ah. All right, thanks.
Member Nolenberg.
Just, are you designing the projects based upon budget or to bring it in under the budget?
Well, we always wanted to be under budget, but we have to start with the budget. You know, we always have to have a starting point.
But but most of them are under budget.
They've,
Or you make the adjustments.
they've been under budget, oh yeah, we do make the adjustment.
Okay, why don't you proceed with, I know I'll have another question or two at the end. You want to proceed with the rest of your presentation?
The next project is Doug Sears. This is in the administration and classroom and just a little bit of site work. The drawings have been approved by DSA. Interim housing is already been finalized and they did move in to one of the existing classrooms. The project has been publicly advertised and it's currently out to bid with the due date of February 5th. And it's going to be completed by the end of March. The building, we got some news last week, I think it was, that the building is completed and it wasn't supposed to be done until mid to end of February. So we're going to go see it tomorrow and take some pictures. So as soon as the site's ready to receive it with the foundations in, they can bring it in. So we're coordinating that stuff right now. But that project does bid next week. And these are the costs for Doug Sears.
Can I ask you, when you say the building is done, then do we know more of the actual costs of, it's not finished, but any changes in what was budgeted so far?
No, because that was a piggyback bid.
Okay.
That was done the beginning of 2014.
Okay,
So the district has already purchased the building under that contract.
I understand.
And that did, but it did come, there were some things that weren't needed in the building that came with the building, so there is a credit coming from them for it. And the next item is just some miscellaneous district-wide expenditures. These are mainly due to, I think they are legal fees. And some stuff having to do with the Eno boards and accessories for those.
Any questions? No? Okay, last page, I think.
The last thing is, last September, the district entered into agreement with IEC Corporation to do the Prop 39 site audits. They have finished their audit and they're ready to present their findings and recommendations. So we do have a meeting with them next week to see what they have to say and then see how those projects coincide with what we're already doing. And that's kind of the goal, so we don't have to pay for something to be designed in order to comply with the Prop 39. And it looks like everything will be fine with the modernizations. We should be able to get it just through the HVAC replacement. But I'll have a little more information on that for the next board meeting.
Let me ask you maybe a dumb question. So we received $261,000 received from whom?
From the state.
From the state. We applied for that, we received it.
Mhm.
Well done. And then, but that's planning funds,
Correct.
is that right? Okay.
But whatever is remaining of the planning funds can be applied to the projects.
And we would would separately apply for Prop 39 funds for actual building stuff?
Yes.
Question number Nollenberg?
Are these grant funds?
I I don't think it's a grant. It's just, it's a program that they're having for 5 years. But it could be,
Do we have
initially,
do we have to repay anybody?
no,
for the
but we
grant?
do have to apply every year.
Oh, okay, well, so that amount that that we see there, does that have to be used within a year and then we lose it, or?
No, 5 years.
Right, okay, that's what you said. Okay,
And how much is left?
I believe their contract was 46,000, so the balance of 220,000 about is left. The next item is, I know there was some concern with the original professional consultant RFPs that went out in 2012 and just the date, the age of them. So we are redoing all of them. DSA inspection services, geotechnical services, special inspection, hazardous material consulting. The pool that we are currently using only has 2 vendors per item, and we want to at least have 3 or 4, just to get see what kind of numbers are out there. So we are currently redoing all the RFPs right now, and then they'll be publicly advertised within the next 2 or 3 weeks to receive statements of qualifications from anybody interested.
other general questions? Member Nollenberg?
Yeah, as I recall, under the, was it environmental, we only had one, and that was,
Well,
what is it, Edison, or they did the panels at the high school?
oh, Chevron.
Chevron.
Okay.
Yes,
So hopefully we'll have more than one candidate for that.
yes.
So regarding the high school, the classroom project, so, I mean, your timeline still stated that we believe it could be completed before school starts 2000 and whatever that is.
The 16-17 school year.
What year are we in right now? Right, okay. Okay, but it's gonna be close. Do you
It's
think?
always close.
Okay, I understand. I understand. Well, I mean, I can only speak for myself, but obviously, you know, we hear questions and our community is anxious to see some progress there. I'm glad to hear. So it sounds like there are 3 components of DSA approval or 3 departments?
3 departments.
Okay, and 2 of them we've gotten some progress with.
We have their comments, so they're done.
Okay, 1 more coming. Okay, all right, that sounds like progress. Other general questions so far from the presentation? No? Okay, thank you. Moving on to item number 16, which is an update on our Common Core plan.
Good evening. Michael Lynn and I are here to provide an update on our Common Core one-time monies that the state gave our district and what we plan to do with those monies and what we have done with those monies. And so before we begin the PowerPoint presentation, I just wanted to call out some supporting documents. I know Mr. Nollenberg is very fond of attaching supporting documents from previous board meetings. And so Mr. Nollenberg, this is for you. On page 11 of your supporting documents, you'll see a handout listing the conferences that our staff have attended over the course of last year and this year. And we update that as soon as the PO crosses our desk for the conference attendance, and then we report those out to our site principals. On page 25, you're also going to see an agenda report from November 13th, 2013. We held a board meeting in which we provided background on Common Core, the one-time monies, and we identified we were going to spend them based on the assembly bill. And that was the evening that the board approved the expenditures in the categories that we had outlined. On page 31 in your packet, you'll also see the adopted budget, the adjustments from 2014, 2017. And this is shared with you as a reminder that the items asterisked are represented in our local control accountability plan, known as the LCAP. And we wanted to share that with you because there's an overlap between Common Core and our LCAP plan, meaning that the Common Core monies that we're revisiting tonight is just one set of monies, especially in the area of technology. And so I know that there might have been some questions around that, how are we spending those funds? So I just wanted to highlight that. So moving along then, just to move forward, there we go. Please allow this to serve as an update of the checks and balances of what we've done and where we're headed with these funds. So again, you'll recall on November 13th, 2013, we had received a little more than $1,159,000 plus. We had outlined the categories of professional development, technology and devices, technology support, Common Core coaching and staffing, and instructional materials. The state's regulations to us was that we could use the monies in specific areas as well as anything that's going to help us move forward with Common Core testing. Meaning we could have updated our bandwidth, we could hire additional technology folks, whatever would help us be more prepared. And so after we did an analysis, these were the areas that bubbled up of need. Taking a look then at our spending plan, and based on these categories just mentioned, you'll see how much money was allocated to each section. And so starting with professional development, $130,000, that brings us back to that page 11 handout in your packet that shows how our teachers and our staff members are using the monies, okay? And so that's just a quick snapshot. And then moving along, professional development then spelled out more specifically. Again, we had looked at the number of teachers per site, and we took that $130,000 and we allocated to the sites based on the number of teachers. It roughly came to $521 or $527. That money was to cover for the conference registration as well as for the substitute cost if the conference happened during a weekday. Our sub rate is $120 a day. And so some teachers have attended 2 conferences, as you can see in the handout, because maybe the registration cost for the first conference was very minimal. And so they had some extra money and they wanted to attend the second. That was site discretion based upon the principal's input. So again, you have that handout there where we have tracked the conferences that are all Common Core-esque. Next, I'm going to turn it over to Michael Lynn, who will talk about the devices that we purchased.
Thank you, Kate. Well, this part is the Common Core devices. We created a set of criteria. The criteria came from speaking with staff, speaking with the principals, also bubbling up from our strategic meetings, I think 2 years ago. One of the goals was to reduce or increase the device to student ratio. To the left, you see the bullet points. The criteria number 1 is meet, exceed requirements of the Common Core state standards. I know in the past when we do presentations, we just have a link somewhere. I figured, hey, we're interested in new QR codes. So anybody in the audience, if you have a smartphone, you want to scan that in. What that does is it basically launches an 18-page document of standards that tie in the need for more technology in the Common Core standards. Let me go back. Okay, so that's the first QR code. Here we go. And ease of use. We don't want to burden our staff, burden our teachers or our students with something that's very complicated. Minimize ongoing support and maintenance. I don't want to get a whole bunch of Chromebooks or Macs or PCs or Linux or Android or iPads, and then we got to hire an army of people to support them. High screen resolution. We're looking at the online testing right now. The resolution is very important to minimize eye strain. We have, I know in some grade levels, 7 hours of testing online. Of course, it's broken into different chunks, but I do not want eye strain to be a factor in how students perform.
7 hours, which grade levels?
I got a
Fifth grade, I mean elementary level?
middle school and, well, I got a, yeah, middle school and high school. And there are performance tasks where the teacher would do a lesson, and then the students will have to then get online and take the tests. Now, if we don't have enough devices, what happens is, and the students cycle through the labs, the students who do not get access immediately then may not do as well as the students who are able to access the lab right after the performance demonstration. Okay, price to value and longevity, the whole life cycle cost of adopting a device, for example. We want to look at the best item that we can get and at the lowest price. And finally, we used to have 3-year warranties. We used to have warranties that we can buy. I mean, you go to Sam's Club or Best Buy, if you buy a device, they'll try to sell you a warranty. And in my experience, it's a rip-off. If we have sufficient hot swaps, and the price is low enough, to the point where we can have, if a device were to fail, then a kid would just, hey teacher, this doesn't work anymore, and then pick up the phone, and then within a few minutes, the library or the district office can deliver something that immediately will get the child up and running. As opposed to, okay, we're gonna package it up, get a RMA number, and then ship it in, and maybe, if we're lucky, 2 weeks later, we get a FedEx back, refurbished. So sufficient hot swaps is one of the criteria. All right, moving forward. Sorry for one rule of thumb about presentations, don't put too much text. I just buy it, with this I buy it, that rule. Too much information, but I'll try to explain every one of them as much as I can. Common Core Devices purchasing details. Okay. I guess the details takes care of why this is so cluttered here. Increase the device to student ratio for student and staff use. That's one of the criteria, one of the goals we're trying to address. Address curricular needs. The bottom line is, why are we doing this? Why are we making these purchases? It's not because we have so much money and we've got to spend it. It's because we really have needs that we have to address. The Common Core standards require them. SBAC, it's a fancy acronym that stands for Smarter Balance Assessment Consortium? Accountability. Okay. So there are 2 major groups in the United States. One is PARC and the other is SBAC. We are with SBAC now. Smarter Balance online testing. So this year is grades 3 through 8. And 11. So high school is only 1 grade level. In total, there's 3,211 students. If we were to get 1 device per kid, we're going to need $1.5 million. We don't have $1.5 million. Okay, so the next bullet, $290 per Chromebook. This is the Toshiba Chromebook. If I may pass this around. Okay.
They tried to make it look like a map.
I think Vince got the $2,000 version. But this is the $290 version. Retail price is, let me get the numbers. Retail price on Amazon right now is $349. Best Buy sells it for $329. CDWG, well, we can't get a retail. If we get a retail, then number 1, they don't have enough in stock. Number 2, we got to go through some sort of a bidding process, and So we want to leverage WISCA pricing. It's another acronym for some sort of consortium that we got to go by. Especially if we're going to spend more than I think $85,000 or something. I've learned so much in the last 3 months on the purchasing details. CDWG sells it for $325 each. Intelitech lowest, which is $305, but that's still $15 more than the lowest. And the 290 is directly from the manufacturer, Toshiba, and they're going to ship it directly from China, cutting out all the middle people. And it took a while for us to get that connection. Okay. $29 per license. This license allows us to deploy the Smarter Balance browser, the secure browser, instantaneously, as opposed to the traditional way of you got to image a computer, then have somebody image every computer where the kids will be testing. The license allows us to create one and then using the admin console push out to all devices that the students will use to use on the Smarter Balance. And then the $3 e-waste is California requirement. Okay, a cart of 36 slots. So they also have carts. And the carts are coming from a different company. The cheapest one is from HP, directly from HP. CDWG sells it for $100 more plus shipping, which is like $200 more. But we're going to purchase so many to increase the device to student ratio for testing that it's better to go directly to the vendor if the vendor allows us to work with them directly. Recommendations also included Macs and PCs. We piloted 3 platforms, Macs, PCs, and Chromebooks last year. So sites are not restricted just to Chromebooks. And sites are weighing options and recommendations. And they're currently submitting purchase requests to me, and I'm aggregating them for Alyssa, who's our supervisor of purchasing.
So the next category of spending was with technology support. And so based on need and determined by sites, again with the focus of increasing device to student ratio, we had several committees meet, we piloted, we deployed devices as you recall from last year. We also had additional trainings for our tech lights so that they knew how to secure the browsers for smarter balance testing. We also hired a strike team last year that you might recall who also were deployed and helped out at our sites. And again, we are looking at a strike team format this year as we move into the window of testing. And we did add a position last year with the board's permission, a technology support technician, which is Sergio's position, and he's doing a great job at that. So he started last year and he's continuing this year. And Common Core coaching, you'll recall that we looked at various models of having teachers coach teachers on the Common Core, not only standards, but on the Smarter Balance test and the performance tests and tasks that Michael Lynn had described earlier. And so where we are now is that sites are developing plans, they've already turned them into us, and they have teachers working with teachers, they're banking time, they're releasing time, they're having after school, they're having collaboratives where teachers are working on lesson planning. There's webinars, tutorials, modules. These are just 2 examples of going to My Digital Chalkboard. There are several modules that teachers can log into, and some are 3 hours in length, some are 6 hours in length, and it covers everything that you ever wanted to know about math, English, science, and it's amazing. And then of course the CDE also has some modules and some tutorials on Smarter Balanced and Common Core. Some of our sites are also looking at working with a company called School Improvement and purchasing a subscription. It's called PD 360, in which our teachers have instant access to videos and they can log in and watch teachers teaching a certain Common Core lesson. And then some of the sites are looking at bringing in speakers to help at staff meetings to develop deeper knowledge of Common Core and what that means. Under instructional materials, you'll recall that we had set aside monies. Sites are using some of this money to buy bridge materials, and so that is the site discretion. Bridge materials are materials that will hold us in English and in math to get us from here to there before the textbook companies had officially come out with their textbook ready for Common Core. You've heard us talk about we're piloting math textbooks right now, and so in the interim, sites have purchased some bridge materials until we decide on what we are buying as a district at large. And then Mike, you might want to talk about the user accounts.
Yes, there's a tool out there, but let me define what the need is. We're going to see a tenfold, at least a tenfold increase in the number of accounts to manage and support. That's because the vision that we have is to increase, to have students have accounts. Right now, only staff have the Tcusd net accounts, staff and board members. Students don't have access to that. So at La Rosa, when I was there, we piloted having some classrooms and students have access to accounts. And right now, currently, we have over 1,000 student accounts. A whole bunch at Oak. Jessica Gould is here. She's doing Google Classroom and everything. Fabulous stuff with the kids. I know about Westgate and Helen Latham. She's doing a whole bunch of Google applications where student accounts are needed. So if we have every child have a Google account, then it's 6,000 accounts to manage. If a child were to be promoted to, let's say, change grade levels next year, okay, we have to change all that. Right now, it's managed in an Excel spreadsheet and some VB scripts that I personally manage. It can become very unwieldy, especially when student user accounts have to be unique. You cannot have MLIN and MLIN, they cannot all log into the same account that, if they can have the password that is. But you have to have different user name conventions, a way to change passwords for students who forget their passwords, a way to create a whole batch of usernames that are not already taken. When students change schools from Oak to the high school or La Rosa to Cloverleaf, Cloverleaf to Oak, we'll have to keep track of all those answers. And if teachers are doing special projects that require certain resources, that class of students will have access to those resources. How do we maintain that? Well, instead of the hard coding and using Excel and using VB and using command line coding to brute force this, there is a development tool. It's not a product where you just buy off the shelf. It's a development environment where there is development, but it's easier. The modules are created where it's like Lego blocks in a way. But it's called UMRA, fancy again, acronym there, User Management Resource Administrator. And it's not just for Google applications for education. It's also for our current investments in, for that library system, the Renaissance Accelerated Reader that the foundation has been very generous to donate to us, and Star 360, also Aries, our main student information system, and Active Directory, where we use to authenticate and authorize our staff to access district network resources. So, and it's a development environment, so it's open to how you code it, but it simplifies the coding piece tremendously. The initial investment is $20,000, and the annual cost of maintaining it, because what they do is they create modules to all the other vendors, Aries, Google, etc., and they update those modules. So the code that we develop in-house keeps, we don't have to constantly hire a programmer to do this. I think that's way too much information at this point. But I want to introduce this to the board at this point, but it's not asking for the board for money yet. But this is something I'm exploring right now, because we're going to need something like this very, very soon, especially when the Chromebooks start rolling in.
So what are our next steps? In working with our business department, our Chief Business Officer, Marianne Sorrell, we're going to conduct calibration checks in February. So where are the sites in their spending plans based on the allocations that they received? And if we feel that, they're going to have some oodles of money left over, we're going to reassess those needs, because we want to maximize the remaining money, and we really want to think smart about, okay, maybe it's time to invest in an additional devices. That is what our principals have suggested, and we feel that that's a good cause, a good use of the money. You'll recall that even though we had pots of money allocated, $130,000 for professional development, technology, etc., that plan is fluid. The monies just need to be spent by June 30th, 2015. And so with that, we will continue to use our tech plan as a fluid document as well to inform our practices as we move forward with technology as well as with Common Core and smarter balance testing. I think that's it. So if you have any questions, let us know.
Questions, comments? Member Nolenberg?
Yeah, right now, we're concentrating on applications instead of hardware.
My vision is that the hardware should, or the problems of the hardware should disappear.
Okay.
And the kids should look at resources that enhances learning, as opposed to, we have to install this, we have to unlock that, we have to get a patch for something.
And the other one is, most of the money funding this was one-time money. So do we anticipate in the next couple of years that we need to support some of these for an additional couple of years?
As we move forward with our LCAP plan, our local control accountability plan, that's something that we would entertain building in even stronger.
If I may add to that answer just a little bit, we're very fortunate to have one very generous parent donor who saw the price on these Chromebooks and wanted to donate money towards 20 of these Chromebooks at La Rosa. And so it's not just the one-time fund. We do have at least one parent who wants to contribute to this cause because this is, it meets the criteria that was outlined previously, and the goal is to close the achievement gap by allowing kids to access resources that are online.
Number two.
I think I'll try to ask his question, and I think he's going to ask it eventually, but I think what we're doing now covers the cost of acquisition, acquiring these devices and whatnot. Do we have funding or money set aside for maintenance and possibly replacement of these devices? What is the life cycle of a Chromebook?
Yeah,
That's my question.
let's see, let me go back.
All right, read them.
On this slide where we had the QR codes, the second QR code talks about how easy and about how easy to use devices such as the Chromebook. Sufficient hotspots. There's a concept in industry, the 5 sigma level quality, meaning 1 in a million would fail. And at this point, Chromebooks are running on solid state hard drives. The number 1 failure for any laptop in the past has been the spinning hard drives. You have it on and you shake it and the pen touches the platter and you get bad data. But Chromebooks are very reliable. 1 in a million might fail, but let's say 1 in 1,000. But we have enough hot swaps, we should sustain the support piece. In terms of my projection, technology changes so fast. I think these Chromebooks will outlast the changes in technology to the point where you might have a new paradigm. Microsoft just came out with the visor, the going to Mars. That's 3D, and then they're doing 3D printing on that. That's, okay, Chromebooks cannot do that, I know that. But so, the industry's gonna change, technology's gonna change, but for the purposes that we have right now, the online testing, which is still 2D in front of a screen, this is more than sufficient. So my first bullet point there, meet or exceed requirements of the Common Core State Standard. And that's the funding, that's where the funding is mostly coming from, other than gifts from parents.
With all due respect there. I mean, it seems like there's built-in obsolescence on all electronic machines. I mean, you get this iPhone 6, a year from now it's dead. Chromebook, I mean, I don't think it's child-proof. As much as technology and everything is the way it is. My kid has a Chromebook and the next thing I know, they dropped it and it's cracked. I mean, those are the concerns that we have here, and how do we have funding and whatnot to replace that? And then also updates. I know with Chromebook it's pushed through the browser and whatnot, but you buy it and it's got this, this fancy dancy whatever microchip that's in it, but a year from now that microchip is, practically 10 years old in terms of computer age.
The 2 ways. Well, we have to get devices in for testing. Then the question is, what device serves the requirements, meets the requirements best? In terms of the drops, the kids dropping it is child-proofness. We thought of getting the 3 years of warranty. Originally, these are 1 year. By default, these are 1 year warranties. To add 2 more years is $56, $55. Okay. So for every 6 of these, we could get 1 more sitting there doing nothing. Really, I mean that's really the equivalent. But really, the 7th item that they shouldn't be sitting there. It could be used to increase the device to student ratio. And if it fails, prices are dropping too.
Mike, could I add just a little something to the conversation? So just to separate this out a little bit, the thing we're talking about right now is this Common Core money, which is one-time money. And so this is a plan of how that money will be spent. So then second to that, when we bring the next budget to you for review, that's gonna have to include a technology plan for what we going forward. But I think we need to separate those two ideas. This is this one-time money, and this is the plan that was developed to spend this. And then secondly, we'll need to have a technology plan that will include the issues that you're bringing up.
And the technology plan, which we already have had to have each year for the devices we had at that point, with these other devices, I guess the question is, are we looking at a much bigger expense of that technology plan, or do we even know?
That's still under development, so we don't have something quite ready to discuss with you yet, but that will have to come back to you.
And
But that would be separate from these common core dollars.
And at the end of the day, we don't have a whole lot of a choice. I mean, we have to get the devices, and when they come in, I mean, it sounds to me like all of you in choosing the devices, among the many other things that you were considering, was the cost now and the cost to maintain them.
Yes.
And so that you've considered that as part of your calculus.
And the other very important part that I think they've mentioned before, but just to remind everybody, is this money must be spent by June 30. So that's why we're being very aggressive and making sure we get all of this in before then.
That makes sense. Member Nolenberg.
Yes, I guess at the last meeting, you had on the item $690,000, and we authorized $250,000. Do we need to authorize the additional money now, or will I have to put it on the agenda? But is this something that needs to be done, taken in account now?
It's not on the agenda for your approval tonight, but we've put an appeal for about $190,000, under $200,000 for 133, I want to say the right number, about 530 devices. So we could get that ordered quickly and shipped out from China, directly from the manufacturer. And then the sites right now, they're turning in their plans right here, sites weigh options. So they're purchasing Max PCs as well with their Common Core allocations. And a lot of them are also purchasing Chromebooks. So their batch of orders will come in later because they have to check with staff, get staff input, et cetera. But we have to meet the smarter balance testing timeline. So we have to purchase those 530 somewhat devices in as soon as we could.
So we will need an increase.
Okay, so I would just suggest when that comes, that, you know, just made, I don't know if a memo or something explaining that, because when the item was before us at our last meeting, which seems like it was yesterday, but I guess it was 2 weeks ago, we weren't quite sure how it fit in, for example, to this whole plan, so I know you'll help enlighten us a little bit. I'd point out, my fellow board members, we budgeted 10 minutes for this item, so maybe a couple more minutes of questions. Member Tiet.
Just have one more question or comment. Thank you, Mary Ann, for bringing up and distinguishing the difference of what we're talking about here, one-time money versus technology plan. I guess that raises the issue of, makes me ask the question, and I'm hoping that whatever we're doing here jives with whatever our technology plan is. Because if, you know, and that we have a technology plan built, you know, or already established, and now this complements that, or this is some part of the grand master plan, so to speak.
Yes, it will, and we will come back to you with our technology plan. You might recall that it's a 3-year plan, and so it is due to the board for approval in 2015. So we're on that.
Okay, Member Ridley.
I'm curious about battery replacement. You know, it seems like the dirge of laptops is the battery poops out before the laptop does. And this doesn't appear to have a swappable battery. I don't know how easy it is to change and what battery life expectancy is.
The rating is 8 to 9 hours. And you know, the reviews were phenomenal on Amazon. There are hundreds of reviews on this. The way I see the hardware piece, again, hardware should disappear and this becomes a commodity item. And it's not just the Toshiba. HP, I had a meeting with them last week, 2 weeks ago, and they're talking about a high definition version themselves. So they're all getting to the full high definition versions now. But they're too late, and I think they haven't quoted me on the price yet. They're a little bit more expensive, I think. HP's heavier too. But the thing is, the battery lives on these, the commodity items, you know, the iPad was introduced 3-4 years ago. That really set the bar in terms of battery life. So these, you know, if the batteries die, it does come with an automatic 1-year warranty, beyond which then we have the hot swaps. I mean, we could get the 3-year warranty, but I think the hot swaps would be better. We get more devices for the kids.
Okay, each person gets one more question. Member Nolenberg, you're on the clock.
This is more of a comment. I just like to thank them for looking at life cycle costs when they're making the decisions, because I think that is one of the things we have not been doing on a regular basis in the past. Thank you.
Thank you. Member Chip. You cede your time to Member Bell. Member Bell.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so actually I can answer a few of your questions. Okay, SBAC, I've seen other states, other districts, they've gone as far as 11 to 13 hours on testing, which really freaks me out, particularly at the high school level. Okay, as an analogy, as far as how we're choosing devices, I'm actually very happy, first of all, the direction that we're going. It's like buying a car. Well, I'll explain. You can buy a Lamborghini, you can buy an American muscle car, you can buy the Toyota or the Honda in this case. They all will take you from point A to point B. Yes, the Lamborghini is faster. Yes, the American muscle car is really, well, it's equally as fast, just not as expensive. But my point is, technology should be a commodity. And, you know, when I just finished my recent fundraiser at La Rosa and Cloverly, and I find out that we've got classrooms where 6 out of the 24 kids have no access to computers altogether to enter their pledges. It saddens me. So, choosing devices, I think, invariably is important based on leveling that playing field. And I strongly believe that. Michelle and I have worked before I got on the board diligently for quite a few years at learning a lot of these things. Okay, so as far as answering your questions on the devices, typically Windows and OS X or Mac devices have anywhere between a 3 to 5 year end of life expectancy. And when they term that, they don't term that in terms of hardware, they term that in terms of software support, updates, etc., etc. Although Windows XP was a front runner for, 20 years? I mean, for a very long time. So, understanding the needs of all the students, we have varying needs, and so that's why I went to the analogy of the car. I mean, you've got the CAD program guys, you've got the film guys, you guys are going to need some horsepower, but then you've also got some other basic classrooms that it could be social studies, it could be some other, electives and stuff, and maybe they just need to get to the web, and they need to be able to do their documents, and they need to be able to turn in their homework assignment, and they don't need all that horsepower. But to answer the question on that, as far as longevity and fixability, I'm a gearhead, so I kind of know this. That particular model right there has an Intel Bay Trail chip, which was released last year. It's basically like a low voltage chip. So the one thing that it's got good that's going for us, it's completely fanless, meaning it does not, well, that's the wrong statement. It generates a very low amount of heat, which is a very positive thing for any kind of electronic device, because hard drives and whatnot also generate heat, and it's a cause for failure. So Mr. Lin was correct in the fact that having solid state drives and not having anything mechanically spinning is a benefit. And also on the other hand, I would say, yeah, I mean, accidents will happen sometimes, and I've broken my fair share of toys. But I think the more important thing is we can look at it from two perspectives. Do we spend more money to put this thing in an OtterBox? For those of you who don't know, it's a really strong case. Or do we teach our kids to value what they have and to respect the devices, to respect the opportunities that are given to them? So, and I would like to think the latter is better. And speaking of that, as far as the battery life that Board Member Ridley was asking, you can actually do it. I've seen some districts across the country, what they've done is they've created an elective RP class where, you basically got a bunch of student techs that would do basic things like this, sometimes crack screens, sometimes batteries wear down and, they would buy it. I mean, I would say the battery for that replacement is probably around $50. So all in all, you know, looking at things from a value perspective, you're spending $330. And frankly, because this is basically a browser-based device, yeah, I do expect it to last 5 years. And because it really requires very minimal in terms of hardware support, and that's one of the value. But on the SPAC side, which is even more important, these things can launch in kiosk mode, which essentially you would, you know, whoever is administering it at each site would go onto the console and they would be able to see all the devices and they could launch and shut off at the same time, which is amazingly good as far as, you know, simplicity and just being able to tell the kids, you're on the clock, go. And that's important, so that's it. I'm done. Thank you.
All right, well, thank you very much for the information, and we look forward to hearing more.
By the way, this is presented, Daniel's presentation, my presentation case, from the same Chromebook.
Wow, wow. Okay, thank you. Moving on to our discussion and action agenda, items that may require discussion, but upon which the board is expected to take action during the meeting. And we'll move on to item number 17. It's 8:30.
Take your recess breaks.
Yeah. We'll barrel forward here, Member Nolenberg, but we'll talk some more about it. All right, item number 17. May I have a motion, please, to approve the English language development redesignation criteria for 2014-2015?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Member Tcusd, second by Member Nolenberg. Let's see, well, we have a memo, an agenda report about it.
And just some talking points.
Please.
And so to let you know that we're in an interesting year, an anomaly year, because of the suspension of the CST, the STAR tests, and we're moving towards smarter balance. And so because we were in the field test mode last year, no scores were generated that we could count towards redesignation. In the past, we used the CST score for English to help redesignate our English learners. And so in the absence of that, the law still requires some standardized form of a test, but then given districts local control to select that test. And so we asked the board's approval to use a local controlled assessment called the STAR 360, which we have purchased, we've authorized, and we're using it in our classrooms, and it tests the students in reading. And so in order for the students to be part of the reclassification criteria to exit the ELD program, they would need to score 50% or higher on the STAR 360. The remainder of the requirements are unchanged, meaning we still need teacher input, we still need to use the CELT, which is the California English Language Development Test. And in the absence of STAR 360 at the high school, for example, we could use an alternative test for our special ed children, or we could use the California High School Exit Exam if the student passed that in English. And so this is our district's reclassification criteria that we bring forth, and we ask for your approval in moving forward for this year only. Next year, we'll be able to use the Smarter Balance student results in English.
And this would meet the state requirements. This
Yes.
is an approved assessment,
Yes.
such as it needs to be. Thank you. Any further questions or comments? Member Nolenberg?
Just a couple, do we have to do this for math also?
No, we do not. This is
And-
about speaking English, and so we use the English language arts
Oh,
components.
okay. And then the proficiency, the 50%, if you get, is that considered proficient?
It would be considered proficient, yes.
Any other questions or comments? All in favor? Aye. I heard 5. Item 18. May I have a motion to approve a new elective course for Temple City High School, Student Success Coach?
So moved.
Seconded.
Motion by Member Tcusd, second by Member Ridley.
And Ms. King is here tonight, and she's happy to speak to it as well if you have any questions. But it's basically taking a course and renaming it for authorization for our instructional aides who are doing a little bit more than just light duties in the classroom. They are doing more academic tutoring and mentoring with students who are in the RAMS program. So Ms. King, is there anything you'd like to add to that?
No, it's just we're trying to extend our RAMS program to tier 2 and tier 3 intervention. So we're looking for student tutors to be in our intervention classes to assist in certain content areas.
And that would be for, say, one period?
Yes,
Like-
and it's an elective course.
And the student who would be the student success coach would do that for a whole year
A semester or for a whole year.
or a semester at a time? Okay. And did you say it was content specific? So maybe they would play that role. They would do that for math or do that for science or do that for...
Yes, or they may be in there, they may excel at a number of things and may tutor a student in 3 or 4 different content areas. It just depends on what the students need.
Member Nolenberg?
Since the students are doing it, there's no cost, is that correct?
Correct, there's no cost to the district.
And so the students have basically been doing some of this already as instructional aides, is that right?
Yes, and they've been volunteering, so now we're trying to do it for, and kind of entice some of our students to want to do this by giving them credit for assisting students.
That sounds like a good idea.
Okay.
Member Tiet?
I guess one, I'm assuming it meets the state requirement for classes and whatnot, and offering credit for a class. And then how, also the other thing is how would this transfer, is it transferable or, to college? How would the college folks look at this transfer?
It's not a Cal State or a UC course. It's similar to like being a student aide or an office aide. It's along those lines.
And students are getting credit for that type of work already?
Yes,
And also, I believe.
yes.
Okay, but I know this is only for the high school. So as far as how it would be viewed by college, was that your question, or?
If they're not getting credit for it, then I don't understand how, if you get an A in this course, because it's based on the traditional 4.0 scale, so I'm assuming an A is 4.
All of our classes are in a traditional. We don't have weighted grades anymore.
Okay.
I think this might help, it's considered elective credit as opposed to a core credit. And so colleges will still recognize that in order to graduate from Temple City High School, the student needs 230 credits, and so many of those credits needed to be in the elective arena.
Got it. Thank you.
Further questions or comments? Anyone with experience having kids in high school or being in high school yourself? Any questions or comments? Okay, all in favor?
All right.
Aye. Thank you. Item number 20. Excuse me, item number 19. That's when you're supposed to step in, okay? He has to do it. You're the vice president. May I have a motion, please, to approve a new elective course for Temple City High School, Introduction to Horticulture?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by member Tiet, second by member Ridley.
And again, Ms. King is here to answer further questions, but just to preface, this course is a course that would fall under Career Technical Education Pathways, the CTE. And as we worked with Pasadena Community College, we wanted to, or City College, I should say, we wanted to start developing pathways, and so this course would fall under a botany pathway, in which biology would be the entry-level course, introduction to horticulture, the second level, and then the students would exit with advanced placement environmental science as the capstone course. And so that would become a 3-course pathway. And so the high school felt it was important to move forward with CTE type of courses, as we have been in discussion with Pasadena City College. Ms. King, is there anything you'd like to add to that?
No, I think, just maybe to clarify, one of the goals of this is that, as you know, the garden that we had out in front of campus is no longer there. It was destroyed through the construction process. So.
You're welcome. I'm sorry.
And, still correct Mr. Randall. Anyway, so now we have an area to explore and to use as
have to be any more facilities for that, or you have the space, you have the dirt?
We have a great big space right now.
Okay. We promise not to order anyone to trample on it.
And there is no additional teacher required for the course. We just shift some of the courses that the teacher is currently teaching to include one period of this.
So could I just inquire, so environmental science, there's multiple sections now, and are they all AP environmental science, or is there a non-AP?
Yes, they're all AP.
Okay, and so this would, as is put in the memo, maybe reduce by one the number of sections of that, and then add this course, one section of this course?
Yes,
And so the CTE pathway, that means that if someone completes all three of these courses, then if they were to go to PCC, for example, would they have some credit already, or what does that mean?
We're going to,
that's a conversation we're working on.
we're working on that.
Yes.
However, even if they did not receive college credit by taking this, they would bypass the entry-level class of botany at PCC and take a higher level.
Okay. Well, I'll just editorialize and say that, looking into that and looking into those types of pathways with PCC, I think is a great idea, and I know there are other pathways that can be explored. Questions or comments? Yes, student board member.
I was just curious, would there be a way to ensure that the students who take this course would be given spots in AP Environmental Science the following year? Because I know that class is kind of in high demand.
Well, we're changing some of the prerequisites for the AP Environmental. That used to be an open course for us, and we have found that that hasn't really met the needs of the kids and for the class well, so we're kind of narrowing down, so that would definitely be an advantage. We haven't set that prerequisite yet for the following year, but I would assume that it would definitely help them get into that class.
Member Ridley?
Thank you. I'm just curious, after our construction is done, where they're gonna be growing things? I don't know that we have much space on.
That area isn't going to be touched by the construction.
That area
It's
is,
it's in front of the 400 building,
okay,
so that area is not
okay.
being
So
touched.
it's kind of where they were doing some growing.
Yes, and it was all torn up when they put the
Yeah.
boiler in.
I think this is a great idea. I really think it's got a lot of value, and I think it'd be very useful. I am aware, as many of you may be, Muir High School has the Muir Ranch, and they have quite an extensive growing area, but they also purchase from farmers that supply farmer markets, and they market it through their, I guess, kind of a student business kind of program. I think it's a great success story, so I think this is really neat.
Yes, final questions or comments? Okay, there's a motion to approve. All in favor? Aye. Thank you. Personnel Services, item number 20, approve academic calendars for the next 2 academic years. May I have a motion to approve those calendars?
I'll make that motion.
Motion by member Bell, second by member Nolenberg. And in order to highlight for our audience what is different about these calendars,
Well, it was important for the district to put up 2 years' worth of calendars for our families to be able to plan better for trips or whatever may come up. This was a little bit of a difficult task to do 2 years. We worked with all of our association groups. Our district has interest as well, and our families definitely have interest. So we came up with a calendar that everybody could work with, is what we're calling it. And the difference for the next 2 years is we are trying to maximize our ADA, and we found that during the Thanksgiving break, we tended to lose a lot of students on that Wednesday. So we are trying a Thanksgiving week break for the next 2 years, where families will be off the entire week for Thanksgiving. Our teachers are going to be here on Monday to do a staff development day. And we're working on some options for that as well, but that is the biggest difference in the calendar.
thank you. Questions, comments? Well, I have a question of our student board member. A week off at Thanksgiving, how does that fall in the academic calendar related to finals or other things?
Personally, I feel that it's really good because I'm one of those students who misses Thanksgiving week anyway. anyway, because I go out of town. So I'm making up the work because I've not really been a challenge, but I have had to talk to my teachers in advance, be like, I'm going to be gone these days, so I need all my advanced work. And so I think, I'm sure many students are in a similar situation where they leave for that week. So having those days off is beneficial, so they don't have to worry about making up the additional work because there's no school on those days.
And I know that the trimester for elementary schools would end right before that break. But the semester for the high school extends into January, is that right? So finals are not right after this break, but they're later, and maybe it would give students more time to work on college applications, possibly. Questions or comments? I note the 3 students in the audience all smiled when they heard what we're talking about, so that's a representative sample perhaps. Okay, all in favor? Aye. Thank you. Moving on. I'm picking up speed. Item number 21, may I please have a motion to accept the receipt of bids and award a contract for the Dr. Doug Sears Learning Center Administration Building Abatement and Demolition Project to 5M Contracting Incorporated in the amount of $18,400.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by member Tiet, second by member Nolenberg. Okay, Mr. Rodriguez, or do we have any questions for him?
I do have a question.
Member Tiet, please.
I guess the obvious one is, why such a huge gap? I mean, it's almost double, more than double, the price from the low bid to the other bid.
Right, we asked the same question too after the bid date. And, you know, what it comes down to is the building gonna be gone when you're done? I mean, there's, either you have the whole building or you don't. So they acknowledge that they don't know why their number was that high. I think it was a clerical error. But they didn't need to pull their bid because obviously they weren't the low bid.
Did we contact the Sunlight Demolition?
Yes,
I
we did.
guess.
Yeah. They're the one that acknowledged their bid was really high.
Okay.
They knew it was high, but they didn't know, I think they overestimated the amount of abatement work.
Okay. And then also in looking at this contract, I can't find the scope of work. And I went online and I didn't know where to look to find the scope of work associated with this contract. So can you kind of give?
Yeah, in the past, we've just been providing the contract and it lists all the items within the contract, which is the Exhibit A, which is the scope of work. But we could include that in the future. We had because it's so much.
Yeah, I think we had this issue before, and I remember asking that at a minimum that we get the scope of work that way. And I think one of the responses earlier was that it's online. And this time I really made an effort to go online to take a look and try to find it, but I couldn't. I guess I'm not as tech savvy as Mr. Bell over there, but so I think if in the future, if you don't mind in these type of agreements, at a minimum, put in a scope of work so we kind of know what we're hiring these folks to do and what we're paying them to do.
Member Nolenberg, I'm sorry, are you done?
I'm done.
Thank you.
When we do the demolition, will the foundation and all the building, basically it'll be ready for them, for us to put in a foundation and.
Yeah, there's gonna be a little bit of grading that needs to happen.
Is that part of the demolition?
That's part of the project that bids on the 5th.
But the demolition will take care of the foundation.
Foundations,
and the building
everything,
itself.
all the utilities would be capped 10 feet outside the building.
Okay.
Member Ridley.
Thank you. And if in the course of doing the demolition, they discover that, oops, they were wrong and there is more abatement work required to be done, are they obligated to do it under this contract?
Yes.
So it's a fixed price contract.
Their contract is to demolish the entire building. Whatever needs to be, we did a full hazardous material survey. So included in the scope of work is a book about this thick of every item in the building and all the testing reports from each item. So it all has to go. Okay, either it's gonna be abated or it's gonna be demolished.
You know, and I share the concern, in my notes I'd written down to ask about the scope of work. I don't really want these agenda packs to become 2 inches thick. So I support the idea of them being available online, and perhaps it'd be helpful to the board to receive some kind of summary of the scope of work, just in bullet points, so we understand what we're approving, because it feels a little uncomfortable to approve a contract that it has the legalese, but it doesn't tell me what work's gonna be done, which is really the meat of what we're approving. So somehow, something would be helpful for us.
I included that in the agenda report, but would you like that also?
No, I think if it's in the agenda report, I think that's accomplishes that.
Could I just, I haven't been on the board very long, but just make a suggestion that when we see things like that, a couple of days ago, you could have posted it online if we had made a request, so I just suggest that we try to make those requests in advance. Thank you.
If I may, place the observation, in the agenda report, it's a very basic statement that the project includes abatement and demolition of the existing non-DSA approved administration building. A little more substance about what that means, I think would be helpful.
Further questions or comments? What's the timing here? So, if we have further questions over here that need to be satisfied, do we need, I'm sensing some discomfort from my colleagues, so, is there not discomfort?
No, I think I can move forward with this because it's a demolition, but I think it's just, for future references, and I think I know specifically mentioned this before, and that, we do need some kind of an understanding as to what the scope of work is. For this particular project, I'm not too concerned because it is demolished and removed building done. But, and I think the other question I had, I believe when I was looking on our website, the bid for this, maybe I'm wrong, but the bid for this closed today. Have you, it didn't close today?
No, it bid on the 15th.
On the 15th? Okay, so, maybe I was seeing things then. Thank you.
Okay, all in favor? Aye. Moving on, 22. May I please have a motion to adopt resolution 1415-20, excusing board member Ridley's absence at the special board meeting, the governance workshop on January 10, 2015.
Second.
Motion by member Nolenberg, second by member Bell. Any questions or comments? Member Ridley was ill. We are glad you're feeling better. Any other questions or comments? Roll call, please.
Mr. Bell?
Yes.
Mr. Nolenberg?
Yes.
Mr. Pomeroy?
Yes.
Mr. Ridley?
I abstain.
Mr. Tiet?
Yes.
Moving on to item number 23, I will make a motion to approve increasing the board member stipend and health and welfare benefit. May I have a second, please?
I'll second it.
Motion by myself, second by member Tiet. We had discussed this in our last meeting. Any further comments or questions about it? I'm going to modify my motion and inquire of Ms. Sorrell, when will we next be, having, say, a first look at budget for next year? Because I still feel that that's the appropriate time for us to act on this.
Your first look at the budget will be the last meeting in May.
Okay, so I'm gonna modify my motion momentarily to table it until that point. But are there any questions or comments? Member Nolenberg.
I thought we were gonna do it retroactive to the election, not retroactive to March 1st of this year.
I'm sorry, I don't.
It was a question of whether we're voting on ourselves versus voting on people who are holding office next election, which is December. Doesn't make any difference, huh? So to make the effective date instead of being March 1st of 2015, effective date December 1st, I guess, or whatever, of 2015.
December 1st, and that may be fine. Again, well, I'll let other people talk. Anyone else? Member Bell?
Well, okay, I agree with, President Pomeroy and his comment about starting this in the new fiscal year because, I feel equally the same way that I think that, would be a good time to start. Please, maybe clerically, I'm not sure. And the only comment I'll make is that, just want the members of the audience to know that, we do this because, we think that it's a fair way to go about. But clearly, as I look at the history, we know that during times of need, we will, I would like to think, and I know that I would like to personally make adjustments to help everybody out as well. So, yeah.
Let me just clarify, I'm not necessarily suggesting the effective date be any particular time. I'm saying that I don't want to vote to increase it. I don't want to take the vote until we're dealing with the budget, and then at that point, we can decide when it could be effective. That's my suggestion, but if we want to make a motion now to change it as of March 1st, then I invite that motion. Further comments or questions, Member Ridley?
Thank you. Actually, I had one question, then I'll make a comment, and that was the fiscal impact for this fiscal is $3,750, and same amount for the following year. And I assume that is the maximum amount if all board members took advantage of the increase in benefits as well as the pay.
It is, I'm not sure who board members may or may not be and what they might decide about taking their benefits, so I thought it'd be most conservative to give
The maximum.
the total amount.
Yep, and I think that's the right way to do it. My observation then is, and I don't know about the other board members, some of us do not take the full health benefit. So the actual impact is less than the maximum stated here. And as I stated when we discussed it last time, we've given all of our staff a level of compensation. And frankly, that's what I was comfortable with giving us, and I didn't need to see us go to the maximum. But frankly, what we're talking about is $27 a month. And, our staff all got it retroactive to July 1st of 14. I think it's reasonable for us to vote ourselves if the board feels it wishes to the increase as stated here. I wouldn't frankly go to the full 240. I would do basically a 5% increase, which is something less. But I'm personally okay with moving forward. It's such a drop in the bucket in terms of our total budget that seeing an additional $3,000 item in our budget, waiting for that isn't going to help us decide yea or nay whether we should do this. And then the other question is, that I raised last time is, sometimes we're uncomfortable voting an increase to ourselves, even though all the other employees in our district have gotten it. And this is a de minimis benefit in terms of the hours we put in. But sometimes the action is to vote it to be approved after the next election, so that we're not actually voting a benefit to ourselves. Frankly, it's such a small dollar amount, I could go either way. I think we should approve something, and whether it's effective March 1st, which I would be okay with, I'm okay with that, or it'd be effective, I don't know, Lynn may have to help us after the first Friday in December, or whatever the legal date is. Maybe just make it January 1st of 2016 to accomplish that. That could go either way.
Member Tip?
I don't want to make slight of any of this stuff, but just us sitting around talking about this for this long and then trying to bring it back, it doesn't, the amount of money we're talking about, the cost benefit analysis, it doesn't warrant bringing it back. It doesn't warrant any of this stuff. It is just, we're taking up a lot of staff time. And I think if you calculate staff time in it, I think that's worth more than the increase we're going to get, whether it's 5% or to the maximum of 240 we're talking about. It's drop, but not even a drop. It's just, I don't know,
Well, let me ask,
typical bucket.
when,
So I'm prepared to move forward with this tonight and move on.
I agree.
I will amend increases stated here to, board compensation to $240, and also the increase in health and welfare effective July 1st, 2015.
Effective July 1st, 2015.
Yes. Going backwards.
You moved it just a couple of months.
4 months from now.
I think he's not making it retroactive
Yeah, not
to,
So you wanna have that effective July 1, 2015?
15, yeah.
whenever our fiscal year starts, right?
Yeah, when the fiscal year starts.
Okay, so you're amending your motion to have this effective beginning of the fiscal year.
Yeah.
I'll second that, and let's vote on it and then be done with it.
Yes, Mr. Clerk. Any more comments? Okay, do you understand what we're voting on? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
All right. 24, the school accountability report cards for each school. May I have a motion to approve those, please?
So with
Second. Motion by member Tcusd, second by member Bell. And the reports are very nice. I did have one question, and I apologize for not being able to preview this question in advance, but in looking at the completion of high school graduation requirements sections for the alternative school and the learning center, I'm wondering whether for the school, I see numbers that are greater than 100. Is that supposed to be a percentage? Let me see.
Tell us what page.
Sure, on the Tcusd Learning Center one, page 15 of 21. In the first column where it says graduating class, and then by school, by this school, I see 150.
So on page 15,
Yes.
is where it says the graduating class of 2013, and it says school 78, that represents all students. I do not believe that is a percentage.
Okay, but then there are 150 Asian students, is that what it means? I only asked, the high school one seems to break it down percentage for each of the subgroups.
I believe the rest are representative of the entire district. And the first one is all students at that school.
Thank you. Further questions or comments?
Just,
Member Nollenberg?
just for clarification for the general public, where we talk about the facilities, school facilities, page 6 is for the Cloverway as an example. And we always put good for everything, and then we're spending bond money to do more.
But they don't all say good.
I know the definition of good here is different than other people would have, so I'd just like to make sure we clarify the definitions so the public understands that there's a difference between when we say something's good, and then we go spend money on bond to prove it, that they understand the significance of that.
Understood. Please.
And based off of the standards set forth in this report, that's how it's rated. But based off of the district standard, we definitely have some room for improvement, and I know our superintendent is making an effort to ensure that all of our classrooms and facilities are brought up to district standard, not just the standard of this report.
Thank you for the comment.
And then the other comment is, and I forget which, there's a couple of where the principal said that the several classrooms have very old carpet, which way they dress with the building, a building and demolition and replacement of the lawn front. And I guess it's just a question of how it's worded. It almost implies if the ashtray is full, we should buy a new vehicle. We're not buying new buildings, they're doing upgrades to buildings because the carpet's old. There's other reasons to do it, hopefully, I think. I just think, since these are public documents and the public's gonna look at it, we should make it clear that we're not doing something, we're not doing a new building for the sake of just doing, fixing the carpet.
Thank you, and I would respectfully disagree that I think that is that it's a component of a larger project, based on my reading of the language. Further questions or comments? No? Okay, and these comply with the requirements set forth in regulations and codes and things that we need to comply with. Yes? I see nodding heads. Thank you, well, thank you for preparing them. Then, on the motion, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Okay, Vice President, what are we on to now?
We are on item 25.
Thank you, sir. Item 25, may I please have a motion to receive the revised board policies and bylaws for the first reading, which are enumerated in item 25 on the agenda. May I have such a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by member Tiet, second by member Nolenberg, and we have board policies regarding education for English language learners and board members' authority and responsibilities. Questions or comments? Yeah, member Ridley.
Thank you. Looking at board policy 6174C and D, my question is, it looks like what we're on 6174C, we're crossing out ELD redesignation criteria 2007-2008. And on 6174D, we're replacing it with 2014-15. And I'm just curious if that's kind of the date that it, or the year it becomes effective, and until we change it again, it just stays with that? Or if this is saying this is only effective for the one school year?
Thank you for that excellent question. And for clarification, you are correct that it is the date that it became effective. And so 2014-15 means it's for this current year until we come back to you for new board approval.
Okay, then my second question, I need some help understanding on board policy 6174C, which I think that's the same numbering scheme, that's interesting. But the next one, about the middle of the page, it says, a waiver request shall be granted in accordance with law unless the principal and educational staff have determined that an alternative program would not be better suited to the student's overall educational development. I get lost in what that means.
Yes, and so the state of California allows a waiver process to occur, and that is handled at the site level. So if I was a parent of an English learner student, and I felt that I did not want my child to be in ELD 1, even if my child was new to the country, I would petition that with the site principal and fill in the waiver requesting that my child is in mainstream classes all day long. And the principal weighs that waiver against what Ed Code says, that the child is supposed to be performing, speaking English, that is, equivalent to a 10th grade, 5th grade, or 10-year-old 5th grade student. And so looking at test scores and assessments then, the site principal would weigh in and make that decision and either sign off on the waiver saying, you're right, your student does not need to be in ELD 1, 2, or 3. Your student can handle the rigors of a mainstream classroom. And if the principal denies that, the principal meets with the parent and has that conversation to explain the need and that this is the best program and best fit for that student. We usually do not receive any waiver requests. However, last year we did receive one. This year, I have not heard of any at all.
Thank you.
Member Nolenberg.
Yes, on 6174B, it says, once identified as an English learner, what's the process to identify, once identified?
Oh, that's another board agenda report, but in a nutshell, once a student registers in our district, they fill in a home language survey. They have 4 questions to answer. If they answer that the home language was anything other than English, or that the parent speaks something other than English, then by law we are mandated to administer that CELT test. That's the California Language Proficiency Test. And based on the score on the CELT, that would determine the student's path. Is the student going to be identified as an English learner, or is the student so well versed, even though their native language was Mandarin, that they can just be totally mainstream? And so that is the process of how a student is identified.
Thank you. And I would point out also that in, is this bylaw of the board, 9200 subsection B as in boy, the first paragraph, there's a line struck out, which the text was, the board member should inform the superintendent or designee before volunteering in his or her child's classroom. That is something that we discussed at the governance workshop, and I believe that that's why that particular wording was excised from what is, I believe, the CSBA form. So that's for the information of Member Ridley or others who weren't there. So keeping in mind, this is for first reading, and we will ask questions between now and when we approve these. Any further questions at this time? Comments? Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Consent agenda, routine items approved by one motion and one vote unless a member of the board or audience requests that any item be reviewed and voted upon separately. May I have a motion to approve the item? Well, first of all, would any member of the board or the audience like one of these items to be reviewed and voted upon separately?
Yes, please.
Member Ridley,
Item 26, please.
thank you. Any other requests? Okay. Which order do I go in? Do I do them all and then do 26?
Yes.
Thank you. May I have a motion to approve items 27 through 31 on the consent agenda, please?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Member Ridley and second by Member Bell. Now, on these items, are there questions or comments?
Yeah, I have a question on
Yes, Member Nollenberg.
number 29.
Yes.
When it talks about PCs, are any of the electronic equipment going towards, like the high school has an program where it collects material and gets processed, and gets some funds for it? Are any of these?
E-waste.
Yeah,
Overall, what we're doing is, Alyssa Lowe, who's our purchasing supervisor, is coordinating with all the sites for when they have e-waste events, so they can have advantage of those funds.
okay.
Anything else?
Number 28.
All right, you're on the clock, Member Nollenberg.
I know.
Number 28.
Just, the contract services, number one, the first one on the list, 21,000 for Ember. Do we know what we spent it for?
I'm sorry, what are you looking at?
I guess, what is it, the vouchers?
Payroll documents, no.
You're on the purchase order page?
Yeah, it's on under 28.
Nevco.
Has this been, yeah, NEVCO, okay. I don't know if our staff has had a chance to specifically look this item up in advance, but what can you tell us about that?
I apologize, I did not bring that purchase order with me, but I will look at it in the morning and I can send you an email.
And the other
I would, hold on, I'm sorry, Member Nollenberg, let me just point out, we have 287 POs and express vouchers, and, you know,
I know,
when we want information about a specific one, we need to advise the staff in advance.
I agree.
I'm sorry, was there any more information? Member Ridley?
Thank you. I just happened to see this computer go with what the company name is, and it flashed up a scoreboard, so I'd be willing to bet that it's the new signage out in front of Emperor that was installed maybe a month or two ago.
That makes sense. Anything else? Okay. All right, well, we have a motion to approve these items. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Item 26, minutes of special board meeting governance workshop of January 10, 2015. May I have a motion to approve those minutes, please?
So moved. Second.
Motion by Member Tiet, second by Member Bell. Any comments on the minutes or questions? Yes, Member Ridley?
Yes, please. I was not in attendance, but I'd like to compliment the author They were very clearly written, and I thought very meaningful, and obviously it was a real valuable session, so they're just really nicely done. Thank you.
And it definitely was a valuable session. Any other comments on those minutes, questions? All in favor? Aye.
And I abstain.
4-0 with 1 abstention. And we are on to board comments and requests. So I'll go first. I would like us to consider forming committees for certain items, specifically facilities, specifically technology, so that instead of having items come to a general board meeting for the first time, they can be reviewed by 2 board members, particularly when they have expertise and interest in a particular topic area. And I think we have some who would fit that bill, so that they could then help report to the rest of the board, and we could streamline some of our presentations specifically, or not, well, streamline our consideration of matters particularly concerning facilities and technology. So I would like to see us consider appointing 2-member subcommittees for those 2 categories. Any other requests for information or future agenda items? Member Ridley.
Oh, hard to see.
I know.
Sorry, Member Bell here. I have a couple items, maybe 3. One, I'd like to have brought back to us some sort of concept, or just on the agenda for us to discuss, some kind of equipment replacement fund. We're purchasing significant assets that we're concerned about the life cycles, and I think it makes sense to discuss how might we deal with that issue. I think it might also be beneficial to have the topic of contingencies. I think we saw tonight the contingencies on our construction is very thin, and it may be worthwhile to discuss that further. And then thirdly, we limited the funding for the purchases of technology, and I think we want that brought back soon so that we can address releasing the rest of the money for appropriate spending, so that we're not hampering the great efforts of our staff.
Thank you. Any other requests for information or future agenda items? Member Nolenberg.
I was looking at, somewhere going through the accountability reports, and there's seldom where we have 100%. And so I was looking at what we do for students who are not proficient, what kind of programs we have to help them. And on the flip side, those who need help, additional help, what kind of programs we have for them. So we're taking the worst side instead of the average.
Thank you. Request for information noted.
Right. And then one of the other ones, and this is more probably to help the public understand what we're doing with construction. And I know it will be time consuming, but it may be worth our while to have a matrix that shows all the little, I guess, for sake of argument, all the little hoops that we're going through for each project, so that the general public does not believe that because we pass the bond, we're gonna just, build up, get some plans, and then we have a construction, and then it's all done. They don't realize how many steps are involved in this process. And we, our reports never go down to the details, but it's just like a checkoff list of all the different things. And it is basically a matrix that we can use for any project. If it doesn't apply, you put NA and move on.
Okay. I have one other request, and I guess this would be a future agenda item, which is for us to, as a board, basically plan to plan, adopt a schedule by which we will be able to say, this is the next phase of the bond, and the blank is scheduled to start being built in the year blank. And so I would like to see us adopt such a plan by the end of the year, and therefore, at the end of the school year, we would be able to say that. Obviously, I'm not going to say anything else. There's not a ton to editorialize. I'd like to see that as an agenda item. Further future agenda items or requests for information? Hearing none. Motion to adjourn, please.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by member Nolenberg and second by member Tiet. Anyone opposed to that?